Dana Whitmore sang the same 4 songs at the same open mic every second Thursday of the month to the same 20 or so people who came for the cheap beer more than the music, and she had mostly made peace with the fact that this was probably where her voice was always going to live, good enough to be liked, never quite good enough to matter. She was 28. She worked days at a dental office answering phones and confirming appointments, and some nights, driving home past 11 with her guitar case rattling in the back seat, she let herself imagine, just for a few minutes, what it would feel like if someone in that audience ever really heard her, instead of just being pleasantly entertained for the length of a song. Her grandmother would have told her to stop counting years like a debt coming due. Vivian Whitmore had raised her from the age of 9 after the accident that took both of Dana's parents on a rain-slicked highway outside of town. And Vivian had never once, in all the years after, made Dana feel like a burden she'd inherited, rather than a granddaughter she'd chosen. She used to sit on the porch some evenings, listening to Dana practice through the screen door, and say the same thing every time, half joking and half not. "You've got a voice worth being patient for, baby. Don't rush it into the wrong hands." Vivian had died 8 months ago, quietly, in her sleep, the kindest way a death could arrive and still somehow the hardest one to accept. Dana still drove out to the cemetery some evenings after work instead of going straight home, not because she believed talking to a headstone did anything, but because there wasn't really anywhere else left to put the things she still wanted to say to her. She went that Thursday night after a particularly bad show. The open mic host had cut her set short for time, the way he sometimes did to the acts he clearly considered filler, and she'd driven straight to the cemetery afterward instead of home, guitar still in the car, mascara doing that thing it did when she cried without planning to. She sat down in the grass in front of the modest granite marker, knees pulled up, and said the kind of thing a person only says out loud when they're fairly sure no one is listening closely enough to hold them to it. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Grandma," she said. "I'm 28. I sing to 20 people who aren't even listening, in a bar that smells like spilled beer, and I go home and do it all again in 2 weeks like something's going to be different this time." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist, laughing a little to herself, embarrassed even in private. "I'd give anything to actually be heard, once. I don't even care what it costs me at this point. I just want somebody to finally listen." The wind moved through the cemetery's old maple trees, and nothing else happened. No light, no voice, no sign that the universe had taken any particular notice of a tired, grieving woman talking to a rock in the dark. Dana sat there another few minutes, then got up, brushed the grass off her jeans, and drove home, and thought no more of it than she thought of any of the other things she'd said to that headstone over the past 8 months that never once got answered. The change didn't announce itself. It crept in sideways, the way most real things do. She noticed it first in the shower 3 days later, humming something absent-mindedly, and stopping mid-note because the sound coming out of her didn't match what she expected to hear. It was fuller, steadier. There was a control in it she'd spent a decade trying and mostly failing to develop, suddenly just there, like she'd always had it and simply forgotten to use it. She thought it was a fluke until the next open mic, 2 weeks later, when she sang the same 4 tired songs to the same 20 tired regulars, and the room went quiet in a way it had never gone quiet for her before. Not polite quiet, actual quiet. The specific silence of people who had stopped doing anything else and started only listening. Someone near the back had their phone up, recording, which had happened before, plenty of times, for plenty of forgettable local acts, except this time when Dana finished the song, the whole bar clapped. Actually clapped, and the host, who usually cut her set short, instead waved her back up for one more. She drove home that night lightheaded, replaying it, telling herself it was probably one good night, the kind every performer got once in a while, a fluke of room acoustics and a receptive crowd, and nothing more mysterious than that. It kept happening. Within a month, the phone video from that open mic had 200,000 views on a local music page, and a producer named Marcus Fessel, who ran a modest but real independent label out of the city an hour away, called her personally after his assistant flagged the clip. He wanted her to come in and cut a single, just one, to see what happened. Dana said yes before she'd even fully processed the offer. The way you say yes to things you've wanted for so long that disbelief and excitement arrive in the same breath. She told her sister Bree that night over the phone, practically shouting with joy. And Bree, 3 years older, steadier, the kind of person who'd quietly held both their lives together in the months after Vivian's death without ever once making it about herself, laughed and cried a little and said all the right things a good sister says. "I always knew it," Bree said. "I always told you, Dana, you just needed somebody to actually hear you." "I know," Dana said, and something in the back of her mind, some small quiet thing, noted the strange echo of her own words at the cemetery in her sister's sentence and then let it go, because she was too happy that night to hold on to anything that might have complicated it. The local singing competition came a few weeks after that. A regional showcase Marcus entered her in almost as a formality, a way to generate a little buzz before the single dropped. Dana won it outright, unanimous judges' decision, a small trophy and a modest cash prize, and more importantly, a write-up in the city paper that used words like undeniable and once in a generation about a voice that 8 weeks earlier had been background noise in a bar nobody remembered leaving early from. She noticed the first thing was wrong 2 days after the win, and even then she almost didn't notice it at all, because the thing itself was so small. She was cleaning out an old email folder and came across a thread from a coworker at the dental office, a woman named Renata who Dana had worked beside for nearly 3 years, who'd covered her shifts more than once, who'd brought her soup the week Vivian died even though they weren't especially close outside of work. She read the emails and felt nothing. Not coldness exactly, just a flat, puzzled absence, the way you might feel reading a stranger's old correspondence. She stared at Renata's name in the sent folder for a long moment, trying to picture her face, and found she genuinely couldn't. Not blurry, not distant, just gone, the way a word disappears from your mouth mid-sentence and simply refuses to come back no matter how hard you reach for it. She mentioned it to Bree in passing, mostly as a joke about how busy the last few weeks had been. "Isn't it weird? I can't picture my old coworker's face at all. Renata, you remember, the one who brought soup after Grandma." "I don't think I ever met her," Bree said. "No, you did, at the funeral. She came." "Maybe?" Bree said, uncertain, not pushing it, and they moved on to talking about the single's release date instead, and Dana let the strange little gap in her memory settle into the same drawer where a person keeps things they've decided not to think about too closely, because thinking about it too closely felt, for reasons she couldn't have explained, like it might cost her something she wasn't ready to name. The single dropped 6 weeks later, a stripped-down ballad Dana had written the year Vivian died, and it did something none of them had fully prepared for. It didn't just perform well, it exploded. Picked up by a national playlist within days, then a late-night television booking, then a full record deal from a label 3 tiers larger than Marcus's, who released her gracefully from her contract in exchange for a producer credit and clearly no hard feelings, because everyone involved could see what was happening, the specific, rare kind of momentum that didn't come along more than once in most careers, if ever. Dana's face was on a magazine cover by the 3rd month. She flew to Los Angeles for meetings that used words like global rollout and brand partnerships, words she'd only ever heard applied to other people's lives. And every single night before she fell asleep in whatever hotel room she was in that week, she thought about her grandmother's porch, about the screen door, about, "You've got a voice worth being patient for, baby," and felt a small ache of guilt for how little patience it had actually taken in the end. She called Bree most nights, less often as the months went on, the way distance and exhaustion quietly eat away at even the closest relationships without either person quite noticing the erosion happening in real time. Bree had started noticing other things instead, small wrong things, the kind of details that don't mean much alone but start forming a shape once you have enough of them. Dana had stopped mentioning Renata entirely, not because she'd resolved the confusion, but because the confusion itself seemed to have vanished along with the memory. She no longer felt puzzled about a blank space, because as far as she was concerned now, there had never been anyone there to begin with. It was Bree who brought it up again, gently, during one of their calls, and Dana genuinely didn't know what she was talking about. "Renata who?" Dana asked, not defensive, just honestly blank. "I don't think I ever worked with anyone named that." Bree let it go that time too, telling herself it was stress, exhaustion, the sheer noise of a life expanding faster than any person could reasonably process. But she started keeping a private, uneasy list after that, half joking with herself that she was being paranoid, half genuinely unable to stop doing it. The moment that changed everything came 7 months into Dana's rise, when her label offered her the opening slot on a major international tour, the kind of opportunity that took most artists a decade to earn, if they ever earned it at all, and had come to Dana in under a year. She called Bree the night the offer came through, breathless, half laughing, half crying, the same way she had the night of Marcus Fell's first phone call. "I don't even know how to process this. A world tour, Bree? Me? Can you believe it?" Bree could hear something underneath her joy that she couldn't quite name yet, some thin current of unease. She told herself was just her own worry, her own difficulty adjusting to a sister whose life had outgrown the shape of the one they used to share. "I believe it," Bree said, carefully. Dana, can I ask you something and you won't get mad?" "Of course." "Do you remember our old neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, from the house on Cedar Street, the one who used to walk his dog past our porch every evening and Grandma always waved at him?" There was a pause on the line, longer than a pause should have been for a question that simple. "I don't think so," said Dana, slowly. "Should I?" "You cried for 2 days when his dog died," Bree said, her voice tightening. "You were 14. You made him a card." "I really don't remember that, Bree." Dana laughed a little, uncomfortable, trying to keep the mood light. "Is this some kind of test?" Bree didn't answer that. She said something about being tired, about needing to go, and hung up sooner than she normally would have, sitting alone afterward in her apartment with a feeling she couldn't yet justify to herself as anything more than concrete, than dread. If you've ever watched someone you love change so gradually that you couldn't point to the exact moment it happened, only the moment you finally noticed it had, you already understand the particular helplessness Bree was starting to feel that fall, unable to prove anything, unable to stop anything, only able to watch and count and wonder how much further this would go before someone, besides her, was willing to see it. If any of that sounds familiar to you, I'd genuinely like to hear about it in the comments. What's the thing you'd never let yourself forget, no matter what it cost you to remember it? And if you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe, because this story isn't finished asking that question. Bree drove out to their grandmother's old house that weekend, the one still sitting empty, unsold, neither of them quite able to let go of it yet. She told herself she was just checking on the pipes for winter, but she found herself, an hour in, going through boxes in the attic she hadn't opened since the funeral, looking for something she couldn't have named if you'd asked her directly. She found it near the bottom of the third box, a manila envelope, brittle with age, containing a handful of yellowed newspaper clippings and a single photograph. The photograph showed a young woman on a stage somewhere, mid-song, a spotlight catching her face at an angle that made Bree's breath catch, because for one disorienting second, she thought she was looking at a picture of Dana. She wasn't. The clipping beneath it, dated nearly 50 years earlier, named the young woman as Vivian Hale, their grandmother's maiden name, described as a voice this city won't soon forget, reviewing a performance at a regional showcase that, according to the article, had drawn talent scouts from 3 different labels. There were 4 more clippings after that one, each more excited than the last, each charting a rapid, glowing rise. And then, abruptly, nothing. No 5th clipping, no explanation, just a folded newspaper page from several months after the last review, a brief item buried near the back pages, announcing that the promising young singer Vivian Hale had unexpectedly withdrawn from an upcoming label showcase and would not be pursuing music professionally after all, citing personal reasons the article didn't elaborate on. Bree sat on the attic floor a long time with those clippings in her lap, piecing together an entire life her grandmother had never once mentioned, not on the porch, not in any of the 1,000 ordinary conversations that fill up a childhood, not even in the last months before she died. A voice this city won't soon forget. And then nothing, ever again. She thought about Dana's sudden impossible rise, about Renata, about Mr. Alvarez, about the particular way her sister's face had gone carefully, genuinely blank each time. No performance in it, no lie, just an absence where a memory should have been. Bree drove home that night with the envelope on the passenger seat, and for the first time since this had all started, she was no longer telling herself she was imagining things. Bree waited 3 days before she called, mostly because she needed those 3 days to figure out what she was actually going to say, and even then she never quite landed on the right words. Dana was in the city for tour rehearsals, and Bree drove up unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon, the envelope sitting on the passenger seat the whole drive like something that might combust if she looked at it too directly. She found Dana in a rented rehearsal space between sessions, glowing in the particular way people glow when every part of their life had finally clicked into place at once. New haircut, new clothes, a whole team of people orbiting her who all seemed to know her schedule better than Bree did anymore. Bree hugged her hard, delighted and surprised, and led her to a quiet side room to catch up before the next block of rehearsal started. "You look tired," Dana asked, studying her sister's face. "Is everything okay?" "I need to show you something." Bree set the envelope on the table between them and slid out the photograph first, watching Dana's face carefully as she picked it up. Dana went quiet for a long moment, turning the photograph over, reading the caption on the back in Vivian's own handwriting. "This looks like me," Dana said, half laughing, unsettled. "Who is this?" "It's Grandma, Vivian Hale, before she married Grandpa." Slee slid the newspaper clippings across next, one at a time, letting Dana read each rise, each glowing review, and then the final clipping, the abrupt end, the vague personal reasons that explained nothing at all. "She was you, Dana, exactly this, same rise, same speed." And then she just stopped, walked away from all of it at the height of it, and never told either of us a single word about it our whole lives. Dana set the clippings down slowly, her hands not quite steady. "What are you saying? That this is, what, hereditary? A coincidence?" "I'm saying I don't think it's a coincidence, and I don't think it's just talent either." Bree reached across the table and took her sister's hand, the way she used to when they were kids and one of them had a nightwear. "Dana, I need you to think back, really think. The night before all of this started, before the open mic, before Marcus called, where were you? What did you do?" Dana opened her mouth to answer easily, automatically, and then stopped, because the honest answer wasn't there the way it should have been. She remembered being at the cemetery sometimes that fall, in the general blurred way you remember a repeated habit rather than any specific visit. She could not, when she genuinely searched for it, remember what she'd said that particular night, or whether she'd said anything at all. "I don't remember," Dana admitted, quietly, and something about hearing herself say it out loud in this room, in front of the clippings and the photograph of a woman who looked exactly like her, frightened her in a way that surprised her with its intensity. "I think you made some kind of wish," Bree said. "I think Grandma made the same one decades ago, and I think she walked away from everything the second she understood what it was actually costing her. And I think that's exactly what those personal reasons meant, Dana. I think she found out, and she stopped before it took anything from her that she couldn't get back." Dana sat with that for a long moment and then laughed, short and unconvincing, the laugh of someone trying to talk themselves out of believing something they already believed. "Bree, listen to yourself. You're talking about magic, wishes. I know things have been strange lately, but this is a career, not a curse." "Then explain Renata," Bree said. "Explain Mr. Alvarez. Explain why you can look me dead in the eye and tell me you genuinely don't remember two people who mattered to you, with absolutely no distress about it at all, like there's nothing missing because as far as you're concerned, there was never anything there to miss." Dana didn't have an answer for that. She sat very still, looking at the photograph of her grandmother at roughly the same age she was now, at the same rising trajectory, at the same abrupt and unexplained silence that followed it, and for the first time since the whole impossible year began, something like real fear moved through her instead of joy. "What do I do?" she said quietly. "If you're right, what do I even do?" "I don't know," Bree admitted. "But I think you stop, before the tour, before whatever the next big thing is. I think you stop now, while there's still time to stop." Dana didn't stop. She wanted to. In the days after that conversation, she genuinely believed she was going to walk away, like her grandmother had, like Bree was begging her to. She rehearsed the words to tell Marcus, to tell the label, to tell the small army of people whose livelihoods had quietly become tangled up in her rising trajectory. But every time she tried to say them out loud, something in her recoiled from the idea with a force that felt less like her own hesitation and more like something actively holding the door shut from the other side. She told herself it was fear of disappointing people. She told herself it was the ordinary human difficulty of walking away from a dream at the exact moment it had finally, impossibly come true. She didn't let herself examine too closely whether it was something else entirely, because she suspected somewhere beneath the part of her mind she could still fully access that if she looked directly at it, she wouldn't survive the honesty of what she found. The tour opened 8 weeks later, in an arena bigger than anything Dana had ever imagined standing inside, let alone commanding from its center. The reviews the next morning used words even bigger than the ones from her singles debut. Words like generational and once in a lifetime, the exact kind of language her grandmother's clippings had used 50 years earlier, right before they simply stopped. Bree was there that first night, in the front row, the way she'd been at every single one of Dana's shows since the very first open mic 2 years earlier, and she watched her sister command a room of 18,000 strangers with a voice that no longer resembled, even faintly, the hesitant, hopeful girl who used to play 4 songs to 20 regulars for the price of a free beer. Bree cried through most of the set, not from pride, though there was some of that too, buried underneath everything else, but from a grief she couldn't fully name, watching someone she loved achieve everything she'd ever wanted, while some other, quieter part of her kept counting towards something Bree had become almost certain by now that she couldn't stop. After the show, backstage, flushed and radiant and surrounded by people telling her she'd just changed her life forever, Dana caught sight of Bree waiting near the edge of the room and smiled the wide, genuine, delighted smile of someone thrilled to see a familiar, friendly face in an unfamiliar sea of strangers. "I'm so glad you came tonight," Dana said, crossing the room to hug her. "I don't know your name, but thank you so much for being here. It means a lot to have real fans in the room on a night like this." Bree stood very still inside the hug, waiting for the joke to land, waiting for her sister's face to break into the familiar laugh that would mean this was some strange, cruel bit of theater and not what it actually unmistakably was. It never came. "Dana," Bree said, very quietly, pulling back just enough to look directly into her sister's face. "It's me. It's Bree." Dana's expression held nothing but warm, blank, friendly confusion, the exact same open, guileless blankness she'd shown over Renata's name, over Mr. Alvarez, except this time it was aimed directly at the one person who'd spent the last 2 years trying desperately to stop this from happening to her. "I'm so sorry," Dana said, still smiling, still kind, still utterly, catastrophically unaware of what she was saying. "Have we met before? You seem so familiar, I just can't quite place it. Were you at one of the early shows?" Bree felt something break open in her chest, quiet and total, the specific grief of watching a door close from the inside while you're still standing in the room. She thought about saying it all. The attic, the photograph, the newspaper clippings, the desperate conversation in the rehearsal room 3 months earlier where she'd begged her sister to stop this from happening to her, and understood, looking at Dana's warm, unknowing face, that none of it would land anywhere anymore. There was no one left inside that particular door to hear it. "No," Bree said, finally, her voice steadier than she felt. "You were incredible tonight, though, truly." "Thank you so much," Dana said, beaming, already half-turning toward the next person waiting to speak with her, the next hand to shake, the next small piece of a life that had gotten so large it no longer had room to remember the person who'd loved her longest. Dana Whitmore went on to become exactly what she'd once, in a moment of raw grief at a graveside, said she'd give anything to be. Her name filled arenas. Her voice became the kind people described as generational, the kind critics ran out of new words for. She never stopped performing, never walked away the way her grandmother had, never understood in any way she could have articulated what the difference between the two of them had actually cost. She kept a photograph on her dressing room mirror at every show, a woman on a stage decades earlier who looked remarkably like her, though she couldn't, if you'd asked her, have told you exactly who the woman was or why she'd started keeping the picture there in the first place. Sometimes, in the quiet minutes before a show, she looked at it and felt a small, wordless ache she never examined too closely, the kind of feeling a person learns to live alongside without ever tracing it back to its source. Bree still came to shows sometimes, standing near the back now instead of the front row, watching her sister become everything she'd ever wanted to be, understood, finally, completely, and far too late, exactly what the price had all been, and exactly who was the one left to pay it.